and welcome to Happy Mum, Happy Baby, Asking for a Friend. Asking for a friend? What's that all about, I hear you ask? Well, in this brand new edition of Happy Mum, Happy Baby, the podcast, we're taking a break from our usual brilliant guests to take a deep dive into the many issues surrounding pregnancy, birth, and the early years. Our Happy Mum, Happy Baby community is thriving, and I love you all so very much that I thought it felt timely to look into some of the topic areas that we discuss and answer some of those questions that you all send in. So, for Asking for a Friend, I've assembled a group of experts, mums and specialists in very, very different areas, people we trust to give you the best answers possible to some of those big parenting questions. And throughout this special series, we'll be tackling a whole host of big issues, from your pelvic floor to your mental health, from weaning to bedwetting, from teething to trauma. We'll be discussing the issues that can affect all of us through our parenting journeys. And this week, in our very first episode, we are talking about gut health. We're told that the microbes in your stomach can affect all areas of your health, from immunity to anxiety and disease. So after you've had a baby, how can you keep it in the best shape, both inside and out? But not only that, personally, I really want to look at children's gut health and how we can help them, because one of my kids actually is a little bit anxious, and I feel like that's coming out in his tummy. He keeps talking about his tummy aches that he's having. So I'm actually going to use today's podcast episode to help myself, if that's okay with you. I think it will help all of us, because it turns out that gut health and stress are actually really related. Our expert this week is Dr. Megan Rossi, a registered dietitian and nutritionalist with a PhD in gut health. Dr. Rossi leads research at King's investigating nutrition-based therapies in gut health, including pre- and probiotic dietary fibres, the low FODMAP, food map? FODMAP.
It's an acronym, don't worry about it.
No, well, you're going to tell me what that is. And food additives. She also leads the Gut Health Clinic and is the author of Sunday Times bestseller, Eat Yourself Healthy and Eat More, Live Well. Hello. Hello.
It's a pleasure to be here.
I mean, talk about expert. You've got so much going on. You really know your stuff.
You know what? I obviously did not think I'd ever get into gut health,
Well,
historically.
How does that happen?
I know. Well, when I was actually studying nutrition and dietetics back, 15 or so years ago, I actually lost my grandma to bowel cancer. And my mum was a single mum, so my grandma had a really big part in my upbringing. So I actually had a really negative relationship with the gut. But then I started working with all different types of people after graduating. So both in the hospital setting with really quite sick people, but also I was very fortunate to be the nutritionist for the Australian Olympic synchronized swimming team. And what I found so striking is, despite all these people's very different backgrounds, they're coming to me complaining of the gut.
Right.
And I was like, what is it about this organ? It's haunting me, right? I was like, God. So it was 2010. I started to look more into the research, and there was just starting to be more studies coming out about the bacteria in our gut. And I thought, you know what? I owe it to my grandma and to my patients to understand more about this. So that's when I did the PhD, and it revolutionized my relationship with the gut. It became so clear that actually nourishing the gut, understanding it, and loving it could improve people's lives in very real and often surprising ways. So at that point, I was like, you know what? Yes, it's dealing with poo all the time, but I'm so up for it because this is how I'm going to have my impact and help people in a really remarkable way.
Well, and as a parent, I think you become fully invested in poo from day dot.
Yeah. Now I actually have little Archie's poo to experiment on more so. But it helps, I think, other parents, talk about poo, is that I've been dealing with it for, 15 years in the research world, exploring it. It offers so much information. But, gut health is so much more than just poo. It doesn't need to be all icky and gicky. We're finding out, like you highlighted before, these trillions of bacteria that lives in our gut is transforming things. Things like our mental health can be improved by nourishing our gut bacteria. Our risk of things like different types of cancers, type 2 diabetes, all of this sort of stuff that the research is remarkable.
And your gut, I used to think that it was just your tummy or your intestines, but actually it's far bigger than that.
Yeah, 9 meters, G.
Whoa!
Yeah. Every one of us have 9 meters coiled up. So essentially this hollow tube that delivers food from entry all the way to exit. That's the gut health. And along that lives those trillions of bacteria. We actually contain more bacteria than we do human cells in our body. So there's so many of them. And we've only just in the last, couple of years appreciated that so many things we thought humans did, like produce different vitamins and hormones, actually it's the bacteria doing it.
Oh.
Yeah, we couldn't survive without these like little things living within us.
That's fascinating. I can remember the first podcast I listened to. It was with Dr. Chatterjee talking to another doctor and saying about how even throughout generations and stuff, how we've lost because the bacteria was almost being passed around, like how you would pick up your, like almost like in a pub, but not at all, like your hands going into the same bowl, but passing around berries and stuff. You know, everyone's got different sort of bacteria, like if you like, on their hands. They pass it around, and then that feeds your gut in a way.
Absolutely. There's like the bacteria in the air. So like when you go for a walk in the forest, actually you're ingesting some beneficial bacteria, you know, playing in the dirt. I think we've become really quite, you know, too clean with our kids.
Which is really hard now because of COVID.
Exactly, yeah. So I call it clean dirt. So if you're going to like a natural environment like, you know, the bush or the forest, absolutely get the kids involved in the dirt. If you're going on public transport, you know, maybe then try and sterilize the hands. But it is really important. There's this concept called the Hygiene Hypothesis, which is suggesting that this massive increase in rates of different allergies and things like eczema is thought to be related to the fact that we've become too clean with our kids. We're wiping down benches, you know, 8 times a day. And this was, you know, even before COVID. And what happens, particularly in the first, we call it 1,000 years of life for kids, is that the bacteria that they pick up actually is really important for training the immune system, because 70% of our immune system lives in our gut. The bacteria are like the trainers of that immune system. So if we don't allow our kids to kind of experience more diverse strains of bacteria by picking them up from the dirt, so to speak, then they're not able to get the right community of bacteria to train the immune system of what they should react to and what they shouldn't. So yeah, that's what a lot of the research is kind of looking at the moment, you know, getting parents to think, actually, do I need to over-sterilize my children? Actually, can they go and play, you know, with a furry pet? And the science has shown that having a furry pet, particularly in the younger years, actually significantly reduces kids' risk of things like allergies. And we think that, again, is because they're exposed to more microbes.
But I guess, I know that you grew up on a farm, but I wonder if, because people would have been growing up with farm animals or, you know, other animals around, that they would have just been exposed to that naturally anyway.
Absolutely. And, you know, I have a bit of parent guilt raising Archie in you know, North London, very sterile sort of place. But, you know, it's not about trying to release any guilt there. You know, we live in a very different world, but it's about thinking, okay, well, you know what, we're going to go to the forest and I'm going to get Archie in the dirt playing as much as he can. You know, we've got a pet, a little pistachio, little dog. But if you don't have a dog, then, you know, find your neighbour who's got a dog and let them kind of play together. So kind of just looking at what you've got and try and make the most of it.
That's quite, I feel like if I was a parent listening, I'd be, well, I am a parent listening. It's that also that, allowing your kids, being told that you can allow your kids to get dirty, taking out that pressure of having to have a really clean house, having to make sure your kids look pristine. Like, I know that I can put clean clothes on my kids in the morning, and then we go out and within 5 minutes, I don't even think we've left the door and they've already got something down them, or they've been out in the garden, there's grass stains, whatever. And actually that's okay. That's don't beneficial. Have to be pristine. There we go. It's good for their health.
Absolutely is.
But I also think that because, like, in the way that you're talking about it, that's what makes this, it's not a fad diet. It's not a diet. It's actually realising what's going on internally, because you are linking, you know, the bacteria that we pick up and the food that we eat. It's all part of your gut. It's not about cutting out, you know, processed meat or anything, or, you know, not like, you know, like keto or whatever it is that you know, the fad is that's going on at the moment. It's actually, it's something that you have to just be mindful of, and it takes you through life.
Absolutely. And I think, you know, our understanding of gut health has really helped us appreciate, I guess, the importance of food. And like you said, it's not about cutting out foods. In fact, you know, one of my key principles is thinking about inclusion, not exclusion.
Well, I mean, you arrived and there was a plate of chocolate biscuits. And I was like, oh, Megan's not going to have a chocolate biscuit.
I am absolutely having a chocolate biscuit. I mean, chocolate is one of my favorite foods. I would never, ever give it up. But, you know, it's about thinking, okay, I'm going to have this chocolate, but why don't I, you know, have a handful of mixed nuts or some dried fruit, kind of mix in that, some sprinkle in some seeds, you know, especially when you're feeding the kids. And I think this understanding that we're not only feeding the human cells in our body, but we're feeding the gut bacteria. And the gut bacteria are doing things like, you know, helping with our mood, helping with our risk of chronic conditions. So it's actually quite empowering to know that, nourishing the bacteria with their favorite food, which is plants, and you can add whatever you want as your favorite food, nourishing them, actually you can really take control of a lot of the conditions that I think we think, just runs in the family, heart disease, those sorts of things, as well as supporting our kids' mental health. And, I think getting the kids to appreciate that they've got trillions of little pets inside of them from day dot actually can help them embrace more of these plant foods. So, hey, you know what? You might not like broccoli, but I know the little pets inside you really do, and they'll look after you. So if you feed them that, they'll be really happy. Talking to kids like that, I see it with schools all the time, and my nephew, it really does get them think differently about a lot of the plants that they were like, oh, yuck, gross, I'm not having that.
I went foraging at the weekend with an actual expert, so I wasn't just in the garden, in the woods, like picking stuff. But I think that's something the kids would really enjoy doing. Like if you do it properly, or get one of the apps that, because it turns out there's a lot out there that can kill you within 2 minutes. That's what our expert kept telling us.
Very safe.
But just, I feel like that's something that would really get them involved and excited about these different things that they can eat that are just there. The plants that are literally, we think they're just weeds, but actually they're there and they can really help your body.
Yeah, and there's science that shows that, if a kid doesn't like vegetables, for example, you say, okay, well, how about we go to the farmers markets? We'll pick one. You have complete control over it. You pick whatever you want, and they bring it home. They cook with it. They cut it up, obviously, depending on the age. They flavor it, and they're much more likely to eat that vegetable versus if they're just told, eat this.
Yeah.
So they need to take them on that journey. And it's not about perfection. A lot of parents that I see in clinic, their kids don't want to eat any plants at all.
Yeah.
But you just start one at a time, like 1 week. This is your veg that you're going to try. And I guess when we think about, the plants that our bacteria really love and how we nourish them, there's a lot of people think, it's just fruit and veg. But actually, we call them I call them the super six. So 6 different categories. And I think it's worth parents just, again, not having to be perfect, but getting an idea that actually there's these 6 different categories, and each category provides our gut bacteria with different things. So there's the whole grains, there's the nuts and seeds, fruit, veg, legumes, your beans and pulses, and your herbs and your spices.
I love that herbs and spices are its own category.
Yeah, because they're so powerful and they really do nourish the body. So it's just thinking, you know what, we haven't had any beans and pulses all week. And a lot of kids who are a little bit older think, oh, God, I'm not having them. But there's so many ways you can just sneak them in. For example, my spinach and ricotta ravioli or little pasta shells, take out half the cheese and add a can of mixed beans in. Super cheap, makes it much cheaper.
Yeah.
And the kids don't even notice. Like, it still tastes, so creamy from the cheese. So it's just little things like that, how you can add in those extra plants, and the taste buds regenerate every 10 or so days.
Really?
Yeah.
Because that's what I've always thought about. Because if I think about my, growing up, there were many foods that I didn't eat, but as an adult, I eat all of it.
Yeah.
So how much of it is actually your taste buds and not being, not, I guess exposed is the wrong words, but not having them to try, or just the first off being so different to what you normally taste that you discard it? Is it a case of literally just try and try again?
Absolutely. I mean, it depends where you're at in terms of the kid's age. So we know role modeling is really important. Even if they don't like the food, if they're seeing you constantly eat it. So I always, in front of little Archie, who's, only 13 months, I'm like, nom, 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 nom. And don't make him have any, but he starts to grab it because he's watching me. So even if it's quite a bitter taste, he's actually he loves it now because he's watching me. So role modeling is really important. Teaching them about the gut bacteria, kind of getting them on board if they don't like a veg, if they're a little bit older, teaching them actually it's going to help little pets. That's a good strategy. But then, like you highlighted, the flavour and the taste.
Yeah.
It is really, I think, important to ensure that when you're giving kids different plants, that they do taste nice.
Yeah.
You want to eat them as well. Like boiled Brussels sprouts. No one's going to like them. But hey, if you turn it into a pesto, add some walnuts in there, some parmesan, some garlic, you can make it really delicious. Yeah. And highlighting that, any food can taste bad if you cook it wrong. Mm-hmm. So it's just a few little tweaks in the kitchen. For example, if you're roasting veg, add some olive oil on, some garlic. It's going to really bring out that flavor, and the kids are going to enjoy it much more. And then, of course, the more you add, the more their taste buds regenerate. The bacteria in their mouth also helps to make them crave plants more. So starting early.
So on these Asking for a Friend episodes, we ask you to share the 3 questions that you are asked the most. So what is your first most asked question when it comes to gut health?
I think probably what should I feed my child?
Yeah. It's tough.
Yeah, it is really tough. But like I highlighted, it's quite similar to what adults should be eating. You don't need to be preparing a separate meal. So like I said, there's those super six, and think where you can, trying to include something from each of those super six. So for example, whatever you're having for breakfast, could be Cocoa Pops. Add a teaspoon of mixed seeds.
My kids will be so happy with you right now, Megan. Turns out, kids, you can have the Cocoa Pops. Just here's a spoonful of seeds to go on top.
Inclusion, not exclusion. You got to get kids thinking, you know what, I can still have, foods that taste yummy for me, but I'm going to add in some extra plants. And whether it's because they're feeding their gut bacteria or just being generally healthy, whatever kind of works for your family, I think that's a really important one.
Some parents will be a little bit worried about nuts. What is the safest way to introduce nuts to children?
Yeah, there's really interesting research about how we add them in. And there's a study called the LEAP study where they're suggesting that from earlier on, we actually start to add in nuts, particularly if they're high risk. So I would recommend, if you've got a family history of a nut allergy, that you chat to your dietitian or your GP. But they are recommending from around 4 months of age, giving it a teaspoon of, not a whole teaspoon, like a quarter of a teaspoon of nuts, because that's shown to reduce the baby's risk. So earlier introduction is thought to be important. There's a whole world of research around allergies and looking after kids' microbiome, reducing their risk of allergies there. I would start with a peanut butter.
Oh, what's another question that you get asked a lot?
I would say eczema is a really common one, particularly because the research is highlighting the importance of gut health and eczema risk. So a lot of parents say to me, well, should I take a probiotic? My kid's got eczema. I need to get rid of it. And we know eczema is certainly on the rise, and that's where one of the hygiene hypothesis theories comes about. So there is certainly that link there. But at the moment, there is not good quality evidence that you should be taking a probiotic to cure eczema. However, there is actually really good quality evidence. The World Allergy Organization actually recommends, if you've got a family history of eczema, whether it's yourself with eczema or your husband or someone close to you, related to you, then actually taking a specific probiotic during your pregnancy, and if you're able to breastfeed while breastfeeding, reduces eczema risk by about 50%. Really strong.
Wow.
Yeah. So in terms of prevention, it's really strong, but it's not any probiotic. I think the whole word of probiotics, for those who don't know, they're the live microbes.
Yeah, you've got prebiotics and probiotics. What are they? What's
One
the
letter
difference?
I mean, it's so confusing. So prebiotic is a food that feeds a good bacteria. Now, I very rarely recommend people take a prebiotic because you get it from all your foods. If you're getting your 30 different plants a week, you're definitely getting enough prebiotics. And then the probiotics is those live microbes. Now, the world of probiotics is very confused. Media saying take them 1 week, next week they're saying don't waste your money.
Right.
The reality of it is the truth of it is in between. It's kind of like vitamins and minerals. So if you have iron deficiency, you're not going to go and take a vitamin D supplement and expect your iron deficiency to improve, are you? Because they're different things. Yeah. The same goes with probiotics, annoyingly. Each different type of bacteria does different things. So you need to make sure you're taking the specific one which has the evidence for that specific indication. So it can be a little bit prescriptive like medication, but if we want the benefit of probiotics, that's the way we need to treat it. So certainly wouldn't recommend just taking any off the shelf and thinking, hey, yeah, I'm doing it. If you like I said, with the reducing a risk of eczema in your bub, the type is called Lactobacillus rhamnosus, HN001 is the type of bacteria.
Sounds like a little bit like a spell from Harry Potter.
Yeah, exactly. But that's, if you want like that therapeutic benefit, that's kind of where we're going.
And where do you get that?
It's online. So I can't remember what the brand is. We can put it in the show notes.
Okay.
It's actually from New Zealand. The strain has come from. So I always recommend that product for my clients.
What is the final question?
God, there's so many questions that I commonly get asked. I think it would be C-sections.
Right.
We know that in about 10 to 15% of pregnancies, for medical reasons, they need to have C-sections. Yeah. And I get a lot of mothers who are in that category and go, oh my God, I've ruined my baby's gut health, because they've read that, you know, C-sections compared to vaginal births, babies are slightly higher risk of allergies and things like obesity. And that is thought mechanistically because during C-section, that baby's not exposed to the mother's microbiome, the vaginal microbiome, but also the fecal microbiome, because I'm sure you're aware, as when you deliver, most people do deliver some stool as well, and that inoculates the baby. Wow. Again, helping the baby's immune system to be trained by these bacteria. So we certainly do see this in the research, that having a C-section may slightly increase your bub's risk. But don't stress out if you fall into that category where you have to. There is, you know, things like breastfeeding we know is incredibly helpful for establishing the baby's microbiome. So the breast milk not only has bacteria in it, but also about a third of it is prebiotic. So that prebiotic word, which feeds the gut bacteria. Again, I know there's struggles with breastfeeding, but if you are having a C-section, it might place a little bit more importance on if you can for, you know, an extra month breastfeed. And then there's things like as the baby develops, you know, helping it play in the dirt and, you know, expose it to bacteria and, you know, from your puppy. And, you know, when you start to introduce foods, you know, trying to get that plant diversity in there as well. So don't stress. But what I would say is that in some places, C-section rates are like up to 60%, because, yeah, let's be honest, that part of my personality is like, I'd love it, you know, be able to know when the delivery is happening, you know, have all the medical team around. But we know that, you know, the chances of allergies and things are slightly higher. So if you can go naturally, that's a great one. And another, I guess, kind of fun experiment that's happening at the moment is looking at vaginal seeding. Have you heard of this before? Again, I wouldn't recommend it until we have more research studies, but some pilot studies have highlighted. So from parents who, or mothers who have to have a C-section, as soon as the baby's delivered, they inoculate the baby with the mother's vaginal microbiome and fecal microbiome by just getting a gauze. And that helps the baby's microbiome to look more like a natural birth compared to the C-section.
Wow.
And when I was having Archie, I obviously being all up with science, I was like, I'm doing this in case I had to have an emergency C-section. So I packed my kit. Luckily, my husband's a GP, so he was on board with the mechanism of it. Didn't need to use it because I had a natural birth. But I think with more research, again, there's risk attached to it, so I wouldn't recommend people do it unless they're an expert in that space. You know, this might be the future of helping people who have a C-section to kind of help their baby reduce those risk of allergies.
Amazing. But if they do go down the C-section, it's not the end of the world. You can pick up in other areas.
Absolutely can.
Yeah. So the other thing that we do, so we've asked you for your top 3 questions, most asked, but we actually put it out to the Happy Mum, Happy Baby community. So many questions have come in. I honestly, every episode that we've done, I just can't believe how many people go, oh, that topic, I want to know this. So we'll take our time. Some are actually just more about the adult, and then some are more about parenting. So let's go. Do you have simple tips on how to support your gut health? Because this is such a huge area. I guess it can be quite overwhelming to kind of go, okay, I'm going to do this. And how?
Yeah. So think about adding in an extra plant per week into your diet that you haven't had. That's it. One extra plant each week. Because we know that these plants, you know, really are game-changing for bacteria. I don't recommend you need to take a supplement. You know, it's just adding in an extra plant because it's got, you know, humble apple contains over 300 plant chemicals.
Wind in pregnancy. Is that anything to do with your gut?
Yeah, look, you have a lot of pressure pushing into your gut. So what happens with wind is completely normal. You know, the average person on a high fiber diet passes wind about 15 to 20 times a day. That's normal, guys. Yeah. Don't worry about it. But of course, there are scenarios where if you can't hold it back, it can be embarrassing. if, it's excessive and the smell is really bad, then that can be really, intimidating. It can really impact your quality of life, in which case there's definitely many things you can do about it.
Right.
But, and again, I go through in the first book all the strategies to get on top of wind if it's really bothering you. So definitely check that one out. But if it's just, a little bit of extra wind with pregnancy, again, that's completely fine. It's just a case that you've got, this fetus growing in you in terms of pushing on your intestine. And it can slow down the movement of food through your intestine. So food sticks in your intestine a little bit longer, which means the bacteria have more time to ferment that food and produce a little bit of gas. And that gas then can come out the back end. So if you're noticing that, the wind is bothering you, what I would say is we still want you to have plenty of plants, but maybe reduce down the amount and slowly build it up, because our gut becomes really adaptable to the gas. So if you go from not much fiber to a lot of fiber, your bacteria produce a lot of gas, and that kind of gets trapped in your gut and comes out the back end.
Right.
But if you go really slowly, the same amount of gas is produced, but your body actually absorbs that gas and it comes out and you breathe it out instead of it coming out your back end. So slow, gradual increase in fiber is best if the flatulence is bothering you.
Okay. Kind of linked to that, what effect do hormones have on your gut, i.e. period poo?
Period poo. Love period poo. Yeah. So I'm sure every female's noticed that around their periods, their poo gets a little bit loose. And that's just the change in the hormones, which change how we absorb the fluid in our gut and the movement of that. So if that's bothering you, then things like reducing down the amount of caffeine you're having, spicy food, instead of having 3 big meals a day, you might want to have 5 smaller meals. All that sort of stuff can help reduce down kind of the looseness of the poo. In terms of hormones, we know that it's kind of a two-way communication. And I talk about this gut hormone link in the book, where we know that things like estrogen, for example, our bacteria are actually really important in helping to recycle estrogen. And they've had some amazing research highlighting that people who add more plants into their diet, females going through the menopause, therefore feeding their gut bacteria, because remember, plants essentially is our bacteria's food, not human food, they have a significant reduction, around 20% in hot flushes.
Right.
So we know that nourishing the bacteria can really help with hormonal control, PCOS, endometriosis, all of those sorts of things. We see that bacteria are a bit out of whack, unbalanced. And then, of course, we know, like I mentioned about the period poo, that the hormone changes can also impact the gut bacteria. And that's why, again, we see those looser poops. So it is a two-way communication that occurs there.
Yeah, it's interesting. The next question was actually about perimenopause and what's good for you to eat. But even with me, and so I've got PCOS, and I can remember when I was trying for a baby, reading a book that was all about don't eat this, don't do this, don't do that. And I was like, well, what can I eat? When actually, if it is just about more plants and just thinking about it in that way, what can I include rather than exclude, it does make you feel like you can cope with it a little bit more.
Absolutely. If we have show notes, I want to put a screenshot of just like 15 different ways to add more plants into your diet. That's literally so simple. So what you do is just choose one of them that you're going to do for that week. And it just empowers you with a really simple, literally takes 1 minute to do, way to include more plants without that negative mindset. And I mean, we're seeing research come out around the importance of, fertility in our gut health. And I see people in clinic who've been caught up in these really restrictive diets because they've read it's good for their gut bacteria. And I'm like, you're doing the opposite. Like, it's not great. Focus on just de-stressing firstly, because we know that gut-brain axis, having a lot of stress up here can have a negative impact on gut bacteria, and just making, one extra change to your diet by adding an extra plant. That's it. I don't want you to do anything else. Don't do this big diet overhaul because you're going to do more harm than good.
Okay. How does stress affect your gut? And also with that, as a parent, where life does get stressful, sometimes it's so good, it's so easy for people to go, just de-stress. How can you help your gut, help your mind? Like, I feel like it's a little bit of a cycle that you've got to, how can you help? What's the starting point of that?
Yeah, look, it's a two-way communication, similar to the gut hormone axis.
Yeah.
There's a gut-brain axis. So our gut and brain are constantly communicating. So if you're stressed up here on your head, that's going to essentially strangle your gut. And no matter what you eat, that's not going to digest very well, and you're going to get a little bit of a sore tummy or change in poops. And then you can have a negative association with certain foods. You think it's that food when actually, you know what? It's just the act of eating if you're strangled. So in those scenarios, if that's what you're going through, doing, 2 minutes of belly breathing before you eat. So I would never recommend.
Even while you're serving up dinner. Just doing a little bit
exactly.
Of belly breathing.
Don't eat on a stressed tummy because it's just going to make things worse. So belly breathing, really, this is, like I said, the two-way communication. It's called the vagus nerve as one of the main pathways. So doing belly breathing, breathing in and out, the scientific name is diaphragmatic breathing, can really help relax that vagus nerve. So it really allows your gut to be able to digest that food much more, and actually you end up feeling more relaxed up here. So that's the stress element. But there's actually really good scientific evidence. If anyone's into the science, look up the SMILES trial I talk about in the books. But there is that hard evidence that shows that nourishing your gut bacteria with plenty of the different plants, doesn't need to be plants only.
Yeah.
Just adding in extra plants has a significant improvement, clinical improvement in people's mental health, people who are struggling with things like depression, because we know that nourishing the bacteria, they produce different chemicals which can help activate different parts of the brain.
That's fascinating, isn't it?
Yeah, I want people to be empowered by this, to know that actually things that are really getting them down, whether it's, things like depression or family history, making a few little tweaks to your diet can have a measurable impact, and the science is only very new. So let's utilize that science, I think, and let's get excited and empowered by it.
Yeah, absolutely. Can I do this without it being costly? Yes, you can with your tins. Essentially,
save money.
Tins.
You save money. If you cut out the meat and add in, a few cans of mixed legumes, you're literally saving like £10 a serve or a meal. Like, it's a great way.
I've become obsessed with my baby's poo. Is it a good indicator of how his gut is doing?
The poo when they're young is a tricky one. So when we're adults, we have this Bristol stool chart. Essentially, it shows 7 different types of poop. So at one end, you've got these type 1, and the other end is type 7. Type 1 is these hard Maltesers. Type 7 is really loose, like a liquid.
Right.
And what we're aiming for as adults is a type 3, 4, or 5.
Okay.
I can see everyone Googling this right now, going, oh, am I having the right type? And then what we know is normal for adults in terms of frequency is anywhere from at least 3 times a week as a minimum, up to 3 times a day. If you're outside of that, so less than 3 times a week or more than 3 times a day, have a chat to your doctor. There's probably a few things that should be investigated, and we can change and things like that. So we know quite a lot about adult poop. When it's kind of the first 3 months of babies, the poo is very different all over the shop. And I found this really interesting with Archie. I mean,
I can just imagine you at every nappy change just be like, oh
my God, what did you have today? So don't stress, essentially, with the early stages, because their body is going through so many different changes. In fact, the first month or so, after the first month, breastfed babies, actually, they can go 10 days without pooping because the milk is so in tune to what the baby's body needs. There's nothing really to kind of poop out, and the bacteria only just establishing and things like that. So don't freak out if there's something like blood or mucus, and obviously definitely go to your GP. But the first 3 months, things are all over the shop. As they start to progress, there starts to be more of a habit forming, and you notice a sharp change, or if they're getting tummy pain, then again, having a chat to a dietitian might be, they're dehydrated or actually not getting enough fiber as they're weaning off the milk and things like that.
Right. So, and I guess once they're slightly older than babies, just being aware of their toilet habits as well. Yeah. Because I guess it's tricky when they're then at the age where they're going to the toilet themselves and you aren't aware, so you're having to wait for them to come to you and go, oh, it was really loose, or, And
I get my clients to actually look at the Bristol stool chart and get their kids, again, not to fixate on it, but to be aware of the different types that can come out of them, and that can provide a little bit of information. And, we all know if we have a curry, our poop can be slightly loose. So it's not fixating on your poop, but it's worth, every couple of weeks having a bit of an eye on what's happening and any changes and trends, particularly as we get older and risk of things like bowel cancer and stuff like that, that can be a really important one that I wish my grandma had listened to. Would have, saved her and many other, clients and patients that I see. It's a really valuable piece of information.
I can remember going on holiday once and there weren't many vegetables on offer that the kids would eat, and the poo turned almost white. And so the kids noticed and were like, "Oh, we got to eat vegetables." And it was fascinating to see them realising, actually, this is one of the things that will happen, that is not healthy poo right there. They loved it. It's a bit gross, but we loved it.
No.
I mean, there is not a meal that goes by in our house where we do not talk about poo. It's just standard.
Well, you can let them know that actually about 50% of their poo is the bacteria. Fun poo fact for you. Maybe not the dinner table, but,
I was so
desensitized
desensitized to poo chats at the table. It's amazing. What can I do during and post-pregnancy to help my gut? Because I guess at any point in life, this is the point where your body's going through so much. And post-pregnancy, when you are in that early stages of motherhood, what can you do that's, we all like snacking in bed when you're feeding or whatever that is. But is it still that thing of just like that, do what you can, add what you can, diversify?
Yeah. Get the whole grain crackers, get some hummus, get the carrot sticks that are already cut up for you, or hey, just eat a whole pepper. Have what you want, but just think adding an extra plant there. I mean, I know the ideal world is we all meal prep during pregnancy, and therefore we've got 3 months worth of food. But hey, that definitely did not happen for me.
I did a bolognese sauce and a chili con carne. I burnt them both. This is like a week before I actually went into labour. Burnt them both, but still put them into Tupperwares. They just had a little bit of extra black in them. I was like, my pregnancy hormones would not let me get rid of it. It's going into a tub. It's fine.
I mean, pregnancy is a really important time. We know that, the research does show that can really impact our baby's, development and even their taste preferences. So the fluid the baby's, swimming around in, they've actually tested that. And if we eat things like garlic, they can actually measure it in the fluid in terms of, a taste. And the science has shown that it's just fascinating. So not to mum blame or anything like that, but the studies have shown that the babies who've been exposed to certain foods during pregnancy, they're more likely to accept it when they've been delivered because they've had that taste exposure already. Because on average, kids need to be exposed to foods about 5 to 10 times often before they start to accept it from a taste perspective. So kind of keep doing that. But if you do it during pregnancy, now I know particularly during morning sickness, I'm like, as if I'm eating plant. Like I am not.
It's just beige right now.
Yeah. But things like, making seeded crackers and legume mix that you turn to kind of like nuts and add salt and olive oil to it. There are ways to add in plants. Don't have any hot food because it's going to make you vomit. But things like, frittatas, like egg frittatas, are really great cold to help with the morning sickness. So wherever you can, again, adding in those super six without fixating on it, it can really be important for pregnancy. I did want to add, because I think there's a lot of pressure on mums, but actually we know that dad's diet leading up to conception is also important.
Really?
So, yeah, it is. Yeah. So they've done studies to show that particularly the first 6 months pre-conception, dad's diet is thought to have an impact on baby's risk of certain chronic conditions as they get older. So pressure not only just on the mum, getting dad eating, those tin legumes, hide them. Like my husband, I was like hiding things left, right, and
For
center.
your husband?
Yeah. I mean, he's an NHS GP. You think he'd know better.
I mean, my obstetrician was eating a packet of biscuits a day. He was just like, do as I say, not as I do.
Yeah. He's coming around to it because literally I've noticed like his taste buds have changed. Like he went and had something like Five Guys the other night, was with friends, and he was like, I didn't even enjoy it. And he was devastated by the fact that he didn't enjoy it because his taste buds can change. But adding more plants sneakily. Frozen cauliflower in a smoothie. They don't know. Yeah, they don't know about it. And
does it not have any flavour then if it's? No,
not if you're adding things like, some mixed berries in there, a date, some ice.
And if it's frozen as well, it's raw, so it's in its best form, right?
No. I wouldn't say raw is definitely better. No, it's, get the frozen packs. They're pre-cooked for you, aren't they?
Are they pre-cooked?
Yeah, they're pre-cooked.
I did not know that.
Yeah, that's you just put them in the microwave for a minute to defrost them, but they're already cooked.
Amazing.
Yeah. So again, that's a simple hack that you don't need to spend hours, cooking or prepping. buy it from your local supermarket, put in the freezer, and then smoothie time, sneak one in.
Our tips and takeaways from this would be a little bit. Make it easy, make it accessible, put your spoonful on your Cocoa Pops, diversify. It's actually much more simple than it seems. And also, this is for a long-term thing. It's not something that you want to plonk in and overwrite everything you've already done before. It's about adding to it.
Look at that. You could do my job for me.
I don't think so. I don't think so. When it comes to microbiomes, like all these
Scientific
things,
names.
I was like, oh. But it's okay. You've done it in a really accessible way, which is why I think everyone loves you so much. So the final 3 sentences that I would love you to complete are: being a parent means.
Crazy love. I mean, would you allow anyone else to wake up in the middle of the night, throw food at your face, tantrums? No, you wouldn't. But you still love them. It's crazy. It's crazy.
Yeah,
it's not normal.
True. Crazy love.
Yeah.
If I could tell you one thing, it would be:
eat with your kids as much as you can. Role model. It's literally a game changer from day dot, even when they're just little babies and you don't think they're taking anything in. Snack in front of them.
I always find that if on the rare occasions that we cook something different, they are eating off our plate. They always be like, what is that? Like we've given ourselves something special.
Yeah.
And I'm happy when
I'm tickling Archie in the backyard and he's like hysterically laughing. It's just nothing, that giggle when they're little, it just, oh my God, the oxytocin hormone, the love hormone just like oozes from my body. I love it.
It's gorgeous. Thank you so much for coming on.
It's been an absolute pleasure.
I feel like I can literally ask you questions all day long.
Who needs to do anything else today?